Hello, I am Jessica Klimish of JEK Writing Studio. I'm a creative writer, writing coach, and editor. I always say that there is no one right way to write, and I stand by that. But that said, if you are hell-bent on following formulas for your writing, I want to give you some things to think about and to consider when it comes to creative writing. I also want to contextualize what I'm saying in the realm of what creative writing is. And it can be a lot of things, but specifically with this emphasis on creative. And of course, formulas have their place in some kinds of writing. And I want to be clear here, I'm not talking about outlines or planning or anything like that. What I'm referring to when I say formulaic writing or formulas is when writers think that something has to happen here and here. Everything gets fit into these little boxes. Chapter 1, this happens on page 2, chapter, whatever. And this idea of this element needs to be in chapter 1. These 8 elements need to be in chapter 2. They have to happen in this X, Y, and Z order. And again, I'm not talking about plot elements. I'm talking about what people sometimes refer to as craft, but really they're plugging words into formulas. And what I always say is that it always comes down to what your goals are as a writer. Particularly, the problem with formulas comes up when a creative writer becomes too reliant on them. The problem is putting this in the context of what creative writing is, because when you are so formulaic in your writing, out goes the creativity, gone is the lovely use of language, and description might feel forced. Again, I want to contextualize this within the realm of creative writing. The average person, especially in the United States, is not a good reader. They're looking for enjoyment, and that is fine. They're looking for story, that is fine. But they're not looking at what actually good literature is or what creative writing is. They're just looking to be entertained. And actually, this is essentially why some people think that AI generated writing is good, because they're used to reading books that aren't good writing. They don't have appreciation for good literature. And I read something fairly recently about how, like in math and science, when AI does something, well, the mathematicians and the scientists can check it and they can prove that it's wrong, because AI has been known to be wrong. But the problem with writing, AI generated writing, is that people like me who have studied writing can say, oh yeah, this is bad writing. But the average person who has not studied writing doesn't necessarily, they're like, well, can you prove this to me? Can you prove that it's bad writing? Because this is based on my study of the form. And how can you prove something that is really pretty subjective? It's not like math or science. But really, I'm not here to talk about AI, I promise. Long before AI was even a thing, I attended a writing workshop. I don't remember much about the facilitator. I just remember that the description of the workshop was rather vague, and before I had registered for the workshop, I had emailed to see if this was an appropriate workshop for someone who wrote short fiction. And I wasn't even writing flash yet. This was long before my flash fiction days. And I was told by the facilitator, oh yeah, anybody. And it was not appropriate for short fiction writers at all. It ended up to be kind of a waste of my time and money. It was very disappointing. And I'll tell you why. It had to do with this idea of formulaic writing. The facilitator had worksheets for the participants to fill out. You have X number of words to write this, and you need to write this dialogue. I don't remember all the different things, but it was like an all-day workshop, and there was maybe 25 worksheets. And the idea was basically you leave this workshop with almost a draft of a novel. A novel based where everybody in the workshop is going to basically have the same novel except with different characters and, different plot. But the exact same thing is going to happen here for every person in that workshop. And so this was a workshop that I really didn't get anything much out of. It was very, very disappointing. But the fact is that this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about, these formulas. But I want to backtrack a little bit here, because television and movies are often highly formulaic, and they're often very successful. In my opinion, there's also, television and movies that are much less formulaic, and they're, in my opinion, much better. But I also get wrapped up in some of these dramas that all follow this same form. You turn it on, you know exactly what's going to happen at the 15-minute mark, you know exactly what's going to happen at the half-hour mark, and so forth. And you're drawn in by the story, and that is okay. There is a time and place for all kinds of writing. This is kind of my point here, is you have entertainment, you have art. Sometimes there's overlap, but sometimes there's not. And again, it's going to go back to what your goals are as a writer. And it's these formulaic types of things that AI can write with no problem, because it's just following a pattern. Because AI cannot create art. Because if you're just filling out worksheets to fill in a formula, is this creative writing? The point I want to make is from that of a creative writer and somebody who helps people improve as writers. Because if you're filling out formulas, that's not a way to improve as a creative writer. That's a way to create a product. It's a means to an end. And it pretty much bypasses the process. And the process, to me, the creative process, the writing process, that is at the heart of creative writing. That is my favorite part of the writing process. I mean, I like to see my words in print too, but I love the creative process, the way things go in different directions. Like, you don't know necessarily what's going to happen. Even if you have it planned out, even if you have an outline, things can surprise you. So to me, that is at the heart of art and creative writing. Over the last couple of months or so, I've heard a few different people say a variation of this idea of when writing is coming easily, it's time to change things up, to challenge yourself. Basically, when you get good at writing something, you need to try something else. You need to challenge yourself, try something new. You don't want to become complacent in your craft. And I think that's sage advice. And I think that if you're writing, if you're a creative writer and you are looking to improve as a creative writer, you need to challenge yourself. You need to say, okay, I'm going to try a different form, or I want to do something different with this. And that is something that formulaic writing can't help you with. Because creative writing is just that, creative. If you look historically at the different kinds of art that has been made breakthroughs, I think of Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. It was the first time he had written a play, and it became this like huge breakthrough play. And those kinds of things don't happen you can't change the world, you can't change the craft of writing unless you try something new. And you can't get better at something unless you try something new, unless you push yourself, challenge yourself. And I think that's really what I'm saying here. As a writing coach, as a creative writer, it's about pushing boundaries. We all have our differences of opinions. We all like different things. Some people like medical dramas. Some people like campy literature. Some people like bad writing. They don't care. They like the story. And that is okay. It's all a personal choice. There is no one right way to write. So if formulas are working for you and they are helping you meet your goal, by all means, continue what you are doing. But if your goal is to be a creative writer, emphasis on creative, think about what that means. What else can you do with your writing skills? What else do you want to do with your writing skills? So once again, I am Jessica Klimisch. I'm a creative writer, writing coach, and editor. And you can learn more at my website, jessicaklimisch.com. I hope you subscribe to my channel, like the video, comment. Thanks.